70% of freight in the United States moves by truck, nearly 11 billion tons a year. The food in your fridge, the fuel in your car, the phone in your hand right now. And a huge number of the drivers hauling it do that between sunset and sunrise, on purpose, by choice. Ask a night driver why, and he will not say traffic, but the real reasons run so deep that once you understand them, you will never look at a semi on a dark highway the same way again. It all starts with the federal clock. Picture a Peterbilt 579 rolling down Interstate 80 somewhere in the middle of Nebraska. It is 2:30 in the morning. The highway stretches out in a long, empty ribbon under a sky full of stars, and behind the wheel is a driver who has been awake since 6 in the evening. He ate breakfast at sunset. His alarm went off while the rest of the truck stop was eating lunch. And right now, while you and everyone you know is asleep in bed, this man is doing some of the most important work in America. The reason he is out here comes down to something every trucker in the country lives and dies by. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA, enforces something called Hours of Service Regulations. These rules are absolute. A truck driver is allowed to drive for a maximum of 11 hours in a single shift. But those 11 hours have to happen inside a 14-hour window that starts ticking the moment the driver begins any kind of work. Not just driving, any work. Pre-trip inspection at the diesel island, fueling up, checking the load on the trailer, filling out paperwork at the truck stop counter. All of it counts against that 14-hour clock. And here's the part that catches every new driver off guard when they are sitting in a truck stop classroom learning the regulations for the first time. That 14-hour clock never stops. It does not pause for lunch. It does not pause when you are sitting at a loading dock watching a warehouse crew take 3 hours to finish loading your trailer. It does not pause when you are stuck in traffic on the George Washington Bridge watching your available driving time bleed away while you sit there burning diesel and going nowhere. So think about what that means for a driver running during the day. You wake up at 6 in the morning. Your 14-hour window opens when you start your pre-trip inspection at 7. By 9 o'clock in the evening, that window slams shut regardless of how much actual driving you managed to get done. And if you spent 2 hours waiting at a dock, another hour crawling through Chicago rush hour traffic, and 30 minutes fueling up, you did not get anywhere close to your 11 hours of driving. You lost time you can never get back. Now flip that around for a night driver. He wakes up at 5 or 6 in the evening, starts rolling by 7 or 8 p.m. The highways are clearing out. The construction crews on Interstate 95 are packing up for the night. The commuters in Dallas and Atlanta and Los Angeles are already home. That driver slides through cities that would have cost a daytime driver 2 hours of clock time and does it in 20 minutes. Every mile he covers eats less of that precious 14-hour window because there is nothing slowing him down. That is money. Truck drivers paid by the mile earn more when they can cover more ground in fewer hours. Night driving lets them squeeze every last drop out of that federal clock. But the regulations are only part of the equation, because there is a crisis happening on American highways right now that affects when drivers sleep almost as much as the FMCSA rules do. It is the parking problem. There are roughly 3.5 million truck drivers in the United States, and there are nowhere near enough parking spaces for all of them. The American Transportation Research Institute has documented a shortage of over 40,000 spaces nationwide, and some analysts believe the real gap is much wider. Every single evening, drivers are circling truck stops and rest areas looking for somewhere safe and legal to park their 80,000-pound rigs. By 6 or 7 in the evening, the major truck stops along popular corridors like Interstate 40 and Interstate 10 are completely full. Drivers end up on highway shoulders, on off-ramps, in Walmart parking lots, anywhere they can find a flat piece of pavement wide enough for a trailer. But here is why this parking crisis matters so much for the night shift drivers specifically. When they are ready to shut down and sleep at noon or 1 in the afternoon, the truck stops are half empty. The morning rush of drivers heading out has already cleared. The fuel islands are open. The shower lines are gone. They can pick a quiet spot in the back of the lot, away from the entrance, away from the reefer trailers with their refrigeration units running at 80 decibels, and they can set up their sleeper berth in relative peace. The parking advantage alone is enough to convert a lot of drivers to the overnight schedule. But there is another factor that runs even deeper, and it has everything to do with when the freight actually needs to arrive at the receiving dock. Grocery stores, distribution centers, manufacturing plants, most of these receivers want their freight early in the morning. A delivery appointment at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. means the warehouse crew can start unloading first thing and have the product on shelves or on the production line by midday. A trailer showing up at 2 in the afternoon throws off their entire operation. So if your delivery window is 6 in the morning in Memphis and you are picking up in Dallas the night before, you do the math. That is roughly 450 miles. At highway speed with fuel stops, that is about 7 hours of driving. You pick up your loaded trailer at 10 p.m., roll through the night on an empty Interstate 30, and you are backed into the dock in Memphis right on time as the sun comes up. You deliver, grab some food, find a parking spot at a truck stop in the early afternoon while spaces are still available, pull those blackout curtains across the windshield and sleep until evening. It is the food that keeps America fed. Reefer drivers haul perishable goods like produce, dairy, frozen food, and pharmaceuticals in temperature-controlled trailers. A lot of these loads move on extremely tight schedules with specific temperature requirements, and the overnight window is when the cold chain logistics system really comes alive. If you have ever wondered how the strawberries at your grocery store are fresh every single morning, it is because a reefer driver hauled them through the night across 600 miles of dark highway while you were sleeping. The berries were picked in a field in California yesterday afternoon, cooled at a packing facility, loaded into a reefer trailer set to 34 degrees, and driven straight through the darkness by a driver who timed his entire run to arrive at the distribution center dock before the morning crew even clocked in. That is the system that puts fresh food on every shelf in the country, and it runs almost entirely after dark. Food service delivery is another piece of this overnight machine. Drivers who deliver to restaurants, hospitals, and school cafeterias almost always run at night. The loads have to arrive at the back door before the kitchen opens, which means rolling out of the warehouse at midnight and making stops on dark city streets until 5 or 6 in the morning. These are some of the most physically demanding routes in trucking because the driver is not just behind the wheel. They are also hauling cases of frozen chicken and heavy crates of produce off the truck at every single stop. But the overnight schedule means the city streets are empty and the deliveries happen fast. And there is one more advantage to night driving that experienced truckers talk about on CB radios and at truck stop diners across the country. And it is something you would never guess unless you have spent time behind the wheel of a Class 8 vehicle. The other drivers on the road at night are better. That sounds like a strange thing to say, but truckers who have been running freight for decades will tell you the same thing. During the day, the interstates are full of passenger cars driven by people who are texting, eating, cutting off semi-trucks to make their exit ramp at the last second. At night, those four-wheelers are mostly gone. The trucks rolling down Interstate 81 at 2 in the morning are driven by professionals who know what they are doing. They use their CB radios properly. They give each other space on the highway. They signal their lane changes well in advance. The whole atmosphere on the road changes after midnight, and a lot of drivers find it genuinely more relaxing than fighting daytime traffic on a congested 6-lane freeway. There is also the way station factor. During daylight hours, way stations along major interstates are usually open and actively pulling trucks off the highway for inspections. That means waiting in line at the scales, getting your paperwork and electronic logbook checked, potentially losing 30 minutes or more of that 14-hour clock. At night, many of these stations are dark and closed. That is not about dodging compliance. These drivers' trucks are legal. Their loads are within weight limits. It is about efficiency. Every minute saved rolling past a closed way station on a dark stretch of highway is a minute that goes back on the clock for actual driving. But every advantage of driving through the darkness comes at a price. And the biggest one is something that happens when the sun comes up and the driver climbs into his sleeper berth trying to fall asleep. Sleeping in a truck cab during the day is one of the hardest things about this lifestyle, and it is something that people outside the trucking industry almost never consider. A sleeper berth in a modern semi-truck is roughly the size of a small closet. You have a mattress, some storage cabinets, maybe a small refrigerator and a microwave bolted to the wall. Some of the nicer setups in trucks like the Kenworth W990 or the Freightliner Cascadia have a flat-screen television, a fold-down desk, and an auxiliary power unit that lets you run the air conditioning without idling the engine. But no matter how well equipped your sleeper berth is, you are still trying to fall asleep inside a metal box in a truck stop parking lot in the middle of the day. The sun is heating the aluminum exterior of the cab. Light leaks through every gap in the blackout curtains. The truck parked next to you has a refrigeration unit cycling on and off every few minutes with a deep mechanical hum. Someone is backing a trailer into the spot behind you with their backup alarm beeping. The fuel island is 50 feet away with rigs pulling in and out constantly. And the temperature inside the cab is a much bigger deal than anyone outside the trucking world would ever realize. In the summer months, the interior of a parked truck cab can reach well over 130 degrees Fahrenheit if the engine is off and there is no APU running. Even with an auxiliary power unit working hard, keeping the sleeper berth at a comfortable 65 degrees in Arizona in July is a constant battle against the desert sun beating down on the roof. And in the winter, the opposite happens. A driver parked at a rest area in Wyoming in January with no way to run the heater is dealing with temperatures inside the cab that can drop well below zero. This is one of the reasons a lot of experienced night drivers keep emergency thermal gear stowed in their cabs at all times. Things like the TerraShell Bivy, a compact emergency sleeping bag with an aluminized lining that reflects your body heat back to you. It folds small enough to toss in a side compartment. But if your APU dies during a winter storm in Montana, or your truck breaks down on a highway shoulder in North Dakota, having one in the cab can be the difference between a rough night and a genuine emergency. It is worth looking into if you drive for a living or you know someone who does. I will leave a link down in the description. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. I break down how industries actually work every single week, and there is a lot more to trucking than what you see from your car window. Now, the temperature and the noise inside the cab are only part of what makes daytime sleep so difficult for these drivers. The real battle is happening inside the driver's own body. Your brain runs on something called a circadian rhythm, which is an internal clock that tells you when to be awake and when to sleep. This clock is driven primarily by light exposure. When your eyes detect sunlight, your brain suppresses the production of melatonin, the hormone that makes you feel drowsy. When it gets dark outside, melatonin production ramps up and you start feeling tired. A night shift truck driver is fighting this biological system every single day of his career. He is trying to sleep in a bright truck stop parking lot when his brain is being told by every photon of daylight streaming through those curtains that it is time to be awake. And he is trying to stay sharp behind the wheel at 3 in the morning when his biology is doing everything it can to shut him down. The hours between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. are what truckers call the dead zone. That is when the body's drive to sleep hits its absolute peak, and no amount of coffee or loud country music on the radio can fully override it. But experienced night drivers learn to work with their biology instead of fighting against it. They invest in high-quality blackout curtains for every window in the sleeper berth. They use sleep masks and foam earplugs. Some run white noise machines or apps on their phones to drown out the constant diesel rumble of the truck stop parking lot. They cut off caffeine after a certain point in their shift so it does not keep them wired when the sun comes up and they pull into a rest area. And they try, as much as their unpredictable schedules allow, to go to sleep and wake up at the same times every day to help their circadian rhythm adapt to the inverted schedule. Some drivers adjust fully within a couple of weeks. Their internal clocks flip, and sleeping during the day in a dark sleeper berth becomes as natural as sleeping at night used to be. But a lot of drivers never completely get there. They exist in a kind of permanent jet lag, always a little tired, always a little off. And the medical research on shift workers across all industries shows increased rates of cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, depression, and obesity over time. The inverted schedule takes a real toll on the human body across years and decades behind the wheel. But every hour on the dark highway is an hour away from the people who matter. And that is the price most night drivers say weighs heaviest of all. When you sleep during the day and work all night, you are living on a completely different schedule than everyone you care about. Your spouse is having dinner with the kids at the kitchen table while you are doing your pre-trip inspection in a truck stop parking lot in Tulsa. Your daughter's school play starts at 7 p.m. while you are 300 miles away on Interstate 44 with a load of auto parts heading to a factory in Springfield. Your friends are watching the football game on Sunday afternoon while you are dead asleep in a sleeper berth behind a Love's travel stop somewhere outside Little Rock. Drivers talk about this constantly on trucking forums and in the break rooms at truck stops across the country. The loneliness and the disconnection from normal life is the #1 reason people leave the trucking industry entirely. Not the driving, not the hours, not even the pay. It is the feeling of being invisible to the daytime world, of existing in a parallel schedule where you are always either working or sleeping while everyone else is living their lives. And yet, thousands of drivers choose this life anyway. Some because the money is better when you can cover more miles on open highways. Some because the road at night feels like freedom in a way that nothing else does. And some because after years of running the dark shift, they have simply become night people. And the idea of sitting in bumper-to-bumper rush hour traffic with the rest of the daytime world sounds worse than anything the overnight schedule can throw at them. There is one more piece to understand about all of this, and it is the part that surprises people more than anything else. Night driving, despite everything, is something that many veteran truckers actually consider safer than running freight during the day. The conditions after dark are objectively harder. Visibility drops dramatically on unlit stretches of rural highway. Wildlife like deer and moose are far more active between dusk and dawn. Drunk drivers are more common on the roads after midnight. And if something goes wrong, if you blow a steer tire or your engine throws a code on a dark stretch of Interstate 90 in South Dakota, help is harder to find and takes longer to arrive. But the reduced volume of traffic changes the entire risk equation. A truck driver during the day in a major metro area is constantly surrounded by passenger vehicles doing unpredictable things. Lane changes without signals, sudden braking, cutting in front of an 18-wheeler that needs 370 feet just to come to a complete stop under ideal conditions. At night, those threats largely disappear. The highway belongs to the professionals. And for a skilled driver who manages his fatigue properly, takes his brakes at the right times, and drives defensively in the dark, the overall risk profile can actually look better than sitting in midday traffic on Interstate 405 in Los Angeles surrounded by 1,000 distracted commuters. That does not mean night driving is safe for everyone who tries it. A new driver who has never worked the overnight shift, who does not know how to manage a sleep schedule, who tries to push through the dead zone at 3 a.m. on gas station coffee and willpower alone, that person is a danger to themselves and every other vehicle on the road. Night driving is a professional skill. It takes experience, discipline, and a complete restructuring of your entire life to do it well. But for the drivers who have figured it out, for the ones who have dialed in their sleep routine and their sleeper berth setup and their federal clock management down to the minute, driving at night is not a compromise. It is a strategy, a carefully optimized system that lets them earn more money, park easier at truck stops, deliver on time, and avoid the chaos of the daytime highway. So the next time you are driving home late at night and you see a line of semi-trucks rolling down the interstate with their marker lights glowing in the dark, understand that those drivers are not out there because they have to be. They are out there because they figured out something that took years of experience to learn. The night is where the job actually works. And the daytime, as strange as it sounds, is just when they close their eyes.